Spring is in the air, and here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, we know what that means. That means that election primaries are right around the corner. Here on State of the Water for the month of April, May, and June, we're having conversations with the candidate. And today, you're going to enjoy this conversation with candidates here in Norfolk and in Southampton Roads. This is State of the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville, and we'll be back in just a moment. Good afternoon and welcome back to State of the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville, and we want to thank you for joining us on this Sunday. We'd like to thank all of our listeners, the Norfolk State University community, the Spartan Nation, and all our supporters across the country. It is spring in the air, and if you haven't noticed, there's a lot of pollen out there, but the sun is out, and we finally are getting a break where we get a chance to get out and get some things done and do a little spring cleaning. But all through this, where hopefully you're staying safe, continuing to adhere to social distancing, and making sure that you're making the best health decisions possible with your health physician and your family. Because again, we will get through this together. For the month of April, May, and June, we're having a conversation with the candidates because primaries are right around the corner. The Commonwealth of Virginia will go back to the polls for, again, one of the most important elections of our time as we elect our next governor and also lieutenant governor and attorney general. And we also elect every House member in the House General Assembly, House of Delegates, and the Senate. But not only that, but we also have some local races in which we are going to elect individuals on our local level. So we're going to have these conversations with our statewide candidates in May and in June. But for the month of April, we're having a conversation with our local candidates for various local offices. And today, we're lucky to be joined by one of the candidates for Norfolk's Commonwealth's attorney. With us is attorney Amina Matheny-Willard. Welcome. So glad to have you here on State of the Water.
Thank you so much, Dr. Claville. I appreciate the invite, and I am very excited to talk to everybody in the city of Norfolk. Absolutely.
You know, one thing that we talk about a lot on this show is that all politics is local, but the local politics is no more local than our school board members, our city council, and our Commonwealth's attorney. You know, so this position is one that persons, you don't hear a lot about it, but it is a extremely important position. But before we get into that and how important that position is, I want our listeners to know a little bit about you because on your website, your campaign platform, and those that know you in the community know that you've been around this area and fighting for a very long time.
Absolutely. I'm a criminal defense attorney. I have over 20 years of experience representing citizens in Virginia. I started my career in Petersburg, Virginia, and then I was a public defender. I was a public defender in Petersburg, then Virginia Beach. I was a supervisor in Chesapeake, and now Norfolk. So over the 20 years, over my 20-year career, I have represented people who have been accused of crimes. When my first started, my focus was on juvenile defense. So I have a long history of representing the citizens of the Commonwealth and just really doing the very best I can to decrease the footprint of the criminal justice system on citizens.
You know, when we look at the practice of law and we look at it from a criminal defense side, criminal law side, there are really just two parties. You have either the defense or the prosecution. Why so many years on the defense side? What drew you to that side of the practice?
When I was 14 years old, I saw a documentary about a individual who had been charged with a crime, and I remember the documentary clearly. And this guy was Hispanic. He had been charged with rape, and he was in prison. He had already served about 15 to 20 years, and the documentary was about new technology or regarding DNA that cleared him of the crime. So after serving a 20-year sentence for a crime that he didn't do, he was released from prison. And that made me want to be a criminal defense lawyer. And I started that day on my journey to figure out what I needed to do, which meant at that time finishing high school, then going on to college, and then going on to law school. So that was my motivation for becoming a criminal defense attorney, so that would never happen to anybody.
We hear we hear a lot of these stories that actually change the trajectory of people, and what they're doing. I remember myself being in law school where all I wanted to do is be a trial attorney for one of the great examples that we had, Johnny Cochran, from my hometown. And when you get there, you're like, wait a minute, there were other things that open up your mind. And academia was one of those things for me. What was that moment in law school for you that you said, you know what, this is what I want to do, or this was the major influence upon me?
Well, that initial documentary was my motivation. Once I got into the courtroom and started representing people, I saw the need for good, zealous representation. When lawyers get out of law school, you can go open your own firm or go to the public defender's office, or you can decide to go to the prosecution side. I decided not to open my own firm because I wanted to help individuals who could not afford representation. Right. So that's why I chose to be a public defender. And in doing that, I've trained several other public defenders, as well as court-appointed attorneys who are attorneys that are in private practice that do court-appointed work. And it's just always been rewarding, especially when I started dealing with juveniles and then later on dealing with adults. And it's just getting to know the people that I'm representing and working on their behalf with the prosecution and the citizens in the community who have been. I have a lot of stories where citizens have been, business owners have been. My clients have stolen from business owners, and I've been able to come to a resolution where my client is actually doing community service at the business owner's shop where they stole from.
Wow.
And so there's a lot of stories like that, and I just love helping.
That's phenomenal. And I mentioned earlier we're about the Norfolk Commonwealth attorney's position and how important that position is, but we don't hear a lot about it. Can you talk to our audience about the importance of the Commonwealth's attorney position?
Absolutely. It is an extremely important position. It's the position that decides who to bring criminal charges against and who not to bring criminal charges against. So the office that I'm running for has the power to, if charges are brought wrongly, then has the power to dismiss those charges. Has the power to reduce felony charges to misdemeanors so that people can continue to be employed and stay in public housing if necessary. So it has a major impact who runs that office and how the office is run, and the culture of the office has a major impact on the citizens in the city of Norfolk. And I cannot stress the importance of the position. I could probably use some. I have a couple of pending cases, and I can express through those cases the importance of that position. But it's an extremely important position, and I don't mind going into those little anecdotes if you like.
Well, yeah, actually, I think that'll be great. As much as you can, just to kind of give an illustration to our listeners, because for you to come out of your practice and run for this position means that it's not only important to you, but it's probably important to the entire community. So give us a little bit more about it.
Okay. First, and this talks about two of my policy positions. The first one I'm going to discuss is being against mandatory minimums. A mandatory minimum sentence basically it's a statute that says if you have this charge, you have to go to prison for 3 years or you have to go to prison for 5 years. The judge can't do anything about it. Your defense attorney can't do anything about it. The only person that has the power to either bring that charge or not bring that charge is the prosecutor, which is the Norfolk Commonwealth attorney, which is the position I'm running for. So I have a client now. My client's charge, first, my client has no prior record. He's a vet. I can tell you just generally this is a situation where he was hanging out with about 3 of his best friends. They were all in a vehicle. Nobody has any record. Again, he's a vet, so he's hanging out with friends, and he legally owns a firearm. He went to pick the firearm up, and it went off. It hit one of his friends, okay? So with that background, he was charged. The charges that he was originally charged with, the sentencing guidelines are 1 day to 6 months in jail. So let me explain that. The charges he got, they are one of them is felony. It's like accidentally wounding someone, mishandling of a firearm. So 1 felony, and I think about 2 misdemeanors. But they do carry up to 5 years in prison.
Oh, my goodness.
Sentencing guidelines basically tell the judges this is how much active time someone should do based on his record. And it's not race-related, so his sentencing guidelines are 1 day to 6 months. He was released April 2020 on bond. I told him, your sentencing guidelines are 1 day to 6 months. Our trial strategy, obviously, is to go to trial, try to get the charge dismissed, indicating that it was not intentional, because it wasn't, and then basically go to trial, try to get it dismissed. Mm-hmm. And I told him, the worst-case scenario, your sentencing guidelines are 1 day to 6 months. So you would be looking at active time of 1 day to 6 months, but if you're out on bond, and I've been an attorney for 20 years, I feel confident that I can convince the judge. Now, I don't tell my clients this because if I can't do it, then I don't want them to be disappointed, but I feel confident that I can convince the judge with a minimum of 1 day incarceration. If my client's been out since April 2020, by the time we get to court, it'll be July. You know, he hasn't done anything since. This was an accident. I can convince the judge that he shouldn't get more than a day in jail, if any time. So that's the discussion we had. Before we go to the preliminary hearing, which was scheduled in February, the Commonwealth attorney, now this is the power of this position. The Commonwealth attorney, the Norfolk Commonwealth Attorney's Office, the prosecutor sends me an email, and the email says, your client's guidelines are 1 day to 6 months. We know he's out on bond, but I discussed with my deputy and I discussed with the detective, which, just as an aside, I will not, as Commonwealth attorney, I will not be consulting with police on how to prosecute cases. But that's what this office is doing. So the email says, I've discussed with my deputy and I've discussed with the detective, and we undercharged your client. We should have charged him with the mandatory minimum possession of a firearm in the commission of a felony, which is a 3-year mandatory minimum. Now, mind you, this is a year late. He got out April 20. We're talking about now February 2021. So we're going to. This is what the email says. We feel that this is what is just. If your client waives his right to a preliminary hearing, waives his constitutional right to trial, and pleads guilty, we will not bring the 3-year mandatory minimum charge if he also agrees to go to jail for 1 year and 8 months. So do you understand what they're saying is either your client agrees to go to jail for 1 year and 8 months on charges that have a recommendation of 1 day to 6 months, or we're going to indict him on a 3-year mandatory minimum and he goes to prison for 3 years. That's the power of this office. They can decide. Now, understand, they did not forget to bring that charge. The intent was to do exactly what they're doing, use it as leverage so he won't go to trial. They probably didn't anticipate that I would get him out of jail pre-trial, because he would have been sitting there this whole time. And then let me tell you what happens when people sit in jail. If my client had been sitting in there for a year later, he would take that plea because he wants to get out, despite the fact that he's not guilty, not criminally guilty. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So these are the kind of shenanigans that this Norfolk Commonwealth Attorney's Office is doing. And if you multiply that by the number of years that this administration has been in and the multiple numbers of defendants that this happens to, it's major. So right now, as it stands, my client, obviously, what would you do? You would take the 1 year and 8 months because you don't want to do 3. And he's been out. He's still out and working.
You bring up a very interesting point, because, a lot of times there's the discussion of being, the old, Ronald Reagan era being tough on crime, right? Is it the job of the Commonwealth's Attorney Office, and is it your view to be hard on crime and to get as many convictions as possible, or to be smart on crime and helping to reduce both incarceration and also reduce crime?
The latter. As Commonwealth Attorney, the goal is crime prevention, but that does not always mean prosecution, and it doesn't always mean incarceration. So I think when you're dealing with candidates who are career prosecutors, what they're used to is incarceration and criminalization, and those are not always useful, especially in the case that I'm talking about now. He has no felonies, no prior record. He's a vet. He definitely does not need to have a felony conviction, because it's going to ruin the rest of his life. This was, this was an accident. So there are numerous cases like that where the Commonwealth Attorney has the discretion to not bring that charge, not bring that mandatory minimum charge, and also has the discretion to reduce the felony to a misdemeanor or dismiss the charges altogether. So the Commonwealth Attorney, the duties that the Commonwealth Attorneys have are to seek justice, not incarceration or prosecution.
Now, if you win this election, you would be the first African American and female in this position. Is that correct?
I would be the first African American woman in this position. Right now, there is an African American male who is retiring, so he is not running again. And that's Greg Underwood.
Right. Do you think, and what is the current racial makeup of the Norfolk Commonwealth's Attorney's Office, and do you think that has an impact on the way cases are prosecuted?
Well, I don't necessarily think it's the racial the race of the attorneys that are there. I think it's a mentality and a culture of the attorneys that are there. And as far as the racial makeup, I do believe that there should be more women of color and people of color in supervisory positions in that office, which is not happening. But again, I've worked with prosecutors over 20 years. There are prosecutors who do an excellent job that are not people of color. So I think it's more of the culture. I definitely think it's important to have a leadership in that office, and someone who is a person of color, in order to relate to the people that are in the city of Norfolk. And I say that because the city of Norfolk is a majority minority city, which means the majority of the citizens in the city of Norfolk are minorities. So in order to establish trust and relatability, I think it's extremely important to have a person of color in that position, just to start with, so that we can have these types of conversations. Right. I think it's also important to make sure that that person is transparent. And I'm transparent about my entire life. If you look at my website and my Facebook, I'm transparent about all of it. And I know how to deal with prosecutors. I know how to deal with police officers. I know how to deal with probation officers, victims, the accused. And so I've dealt with all of that with an eye towards justice, which again is not always prosecution and criminalization.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, you mentioned, your transparency of your life, and we'll give you a moment at the end of the show to tell our listeners where they can find out more about you, and if they want to, be involved in your campaign and so forth. But outside of your platform, inside of the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office, what are some of your community interests that you are currently involved in or would be involved in if you are elected as the next Commonwealth's Attorney for the city of Norfolk?
Okay, one of the platforms I have is what I have dubbed the Norfolk Community Action Partnership. And what that means is talking to civic league groups, which I've been doing as I've been campaigning, talking to business owners, and all of this I've been doing as I've been campaigning, talking to private organizations such as the Oxford House, nonprofit organizations such as the LGBTQ Center in Norfolk and the Southeastern Transgender Center. Basically, it would be bringing all of these groups together. And this includes law enforcement as well as the Sheriff's Department, the Norfolk Community Services Board, veterans organizations. Basically, within the first 30 days in office, what I would do is have probably a Zoom conference. Zoom is just extremely convenient.
Right.
If we're able to get everybody together in the same room at one time, we would do that. But basically have representatives from the city of Norfolk coming together and discussing crime prevention and discussing what can be done. And one thing that I think is extremely important with the makeup of this group, it would be people in representatives from civic leagues, but also I would want at least 2 representatives from each community to come in addition to civic league members. But one of the representatives from each community, the requirement would be that they have a felony conviction. Let me tell you why I say that. Because on a lot of committees and organizations, individuals that have been convicted of felonies are left out because they've been convicted of felonies. Wow. These are the individuals that have been impacted by the system that I'm trying to change.
So their perspective is important.
At the tape, right. So that would be a requirement of at least one of the citizens from all the different communities.
Wow.
In the city of Norfolk that they have a criminal felony conviction.
Wow. That would be a major change of policy, but it'll also help to bring, like you said, that perspective. And I think we're in a time period where Black Lives Matter has done, and the movements that have sprung out from that is that we've understood, mainstream America, we've always said it, that the voices of the underserved, the voices of whom, some may call the minority, but I call the people of color, or have been left out, those who have been impacted the most. So that would definitely be a change, a major, not just a policy change, but I think it'd be a culture change, because now it says that I was a part of the system, but now I could be a part of the change in making it better. Right. Absolutely. So, and I can tell you. No, go ahead. The reason I actually decided to run after 20 years did spring up from what happened last year. Wow. In the Black Lives Matter movement. So I was during the COVID-19 pandemic, and I know we're still in it, but during the height of it, I was at home and I had the opportunity to watch the documentary 13th on Netflix. And 13th, I know a lot of people have seen it, but essentially it's a 2-hour documentary. But the short part of it, the short version is, it talks about how this country went from blacks being slaves to mass incarceration of blacks. Yeah. And at this moment, there are more blacks that are in prison, jail, on probation than there were slaves in 1870. So when I saw that documentary, I continued for a couple of months to work as a,
as a criminal defense attorney, but I didn't feel comfortable anymore. I felt like I had been complicit over 20 years in just, representing people in the system, because I felt like I was validating the system instead of trying to change it. So I no longer felt comfortable being a criminal defense attorney, and then I decided that I had to do something different where I had more of an impact and I could effectuate change. And that's when I decided to run. So, I got in this race. I think I announced that I was running in February. So that's really why it was so late, and that's what happened. I decided that I needed to do more. I'm not a politician. I haven't been a prosecutor. I think for those two reasons, I'm the best candidate for this position. And I am also the only candidate on the ballot that's a person of color. So that was my motivation for running as Commonwealth attorney.
Phenomenal. Now, in our final minutes, I can't believe that the first half of the show has really flown by. But the conversation about your life, about your interests, and the reason is just so compelling. For those of our listeners that want to become more involved, with your campaign, where can they get more information about it? And what are some of the things that you're doing to outreach, especially during this time of COVID?
Well, I can tell everybody, you can go to my website at www.aminafornorfolk.com. You can also type my name into Facebook. I have a personal page and I have a campaign page. You can also contact me at 757-918-9202. You can text that number, call that number, and I will get that. I'll get that call, and I may pick up. So don't be surprised. But we are looking for volunteers. So what we are doing right now is going to different neighborhoods. I've been making a lot of. Personally, I've been going to different organizations, Zoom, Civic Leagues, a lot of Zoom meetings is what I've been going to. But we are at the stage now where we are looking for help. And I'm actually going to post something later today regarding all the areas that we need help in.
Awesome.
But you can, if you can give me your name and your email address and your phone number and just text it to 757-918-9202, that would help. And I do want everyone to know June 8th is the election date, but I'm going to call that the late voting date.
That's right. Early voting. That's right.
Yeah, early voting starts Friday, April 23rd, and it ends Friday, June 4th. And it's at City Hall in downtown Norfolk. It's 810 Union Street, right near the courthouse. You can go there Monday through Friday all day from 8:30 to 5. So I'm asking everybody to get their voting done by the end of April. The last date to vote is June 8th. That's Election Day. And on that day, you would go to the same place you voted for president. But I'm asking everybody to come down, vote early. It's all-day voting at City Hall.
Phenomenal. Again, that's www.aminafornorfolk.com. The number that you can go to, that she said you can call and text is 757-918-9202. She'll get your information there. If you want to volunteer and help with this campaign or just support this particular campaign, you can go there. But this is about you making the decision, making sure that your voice is heard. Early voting for all candidates, local and statewide, starts Friday, April 23rd, April 23rd. And then June 8th is the day of the final day for the election where you can go cast your vote in the primary. In the last 30 seconds, tell us why we should vote for Amina, and if you have any closing remarks.
Thank you. I am asking everybody to vote. I believe that you should vote for me. I am the best candidate. I'm the best qualified candidate to understand what is going on in the criminal system, and I'm the only person of color in this race that can relate to this is basically the system that has, I'm the only person that is in the group that has been criminalized by this system for years and years. So again, and you'll see the story about my son if you go to my website. But again, I know that I am the best candidate for the city of Norfolk. And so I'm asking everyone to come out and vote.
Thank you so much. That's AminaForNorfolk.com. And we'll be back in just a moment for our next conversation with the candidate. We'll see you. This is Save the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville, and we'll be back right after this commercial break.
Blazing Hot 91 is looking for your support. Financial support, that is. Get ready. Coming this May, we're going to see how much you love us.
Quiet, he's going to say something.
We'll be asking for your tax-deductible contribution. We're a public radio station. That means we're supported by you, the listener. You guys tell us you love us all the time.
The hottest radio station.
Now, you can show us how much. And that keeps us blazing the airways with your urban alternative mix of music.
Yo, you know the deal.
So start planning your contribution to Blazing Hot 91 now. Be ready to drop that cash. Save the date, May 17th, 18th, and 19th. It's all love, and it's all for you on Blazing Hot 91.
Make sure you wake up early Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. with the Blazing Hot Morning Show.
I'm Cheryl Wilkerson. I'll have your Behold moment, your good news, your headline news, and don't forget, entertainment news.
I'm DJ INC from the Top Ropes. I'll tell you why every day's a holiday. I'll give you the update on those sports and on-the-spot traffic and weather updates.
And check out the Blazing Hot Tea Report with your girl K Noteworthy, where I'll be serving all the scoop about your favorite celebrity.
And can't forget about the Blazing Hot Morning Shower mix with the legendary DJ Heart Attack. So start your day with us Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. right here on Blazing Hot 91. We'll get through this together.
It's spring in the air, and here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, that means that not only are things coming back, but also we have yet another important election. On June 8th, we will go to the polls during the primary to choose the candidates to run in the general election for our statewide offices and our local, both for governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, every member of the General Assembly, and elections in our local area. Here for the month of April, May, and June, we're having a conversation with the candidate. And today we're having a conversation with local candidates. In our first half hour, we had a conversation with one of the candidates for Norfolk Commonwealth's attorney. And here in our second half hour, we're going to have a conversation with a candidate for a delegate seat here in South Hampton Roads. Remember, go out and vote and make sure your voice is heard. But now we'd like to welcome Mr. Dante Walston, candidate for delegate here in South Hampton Roads. Mr. Walston, welcome to State of the Water.
Hey, good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Listen, we're so glad to have you and so glad that you were able to be on our conversation, with our candidates, where you have an opportunity to talk with the public and they have an opportunity to engage you as well. So I know that you're busy and I know that you're out on the campaign trail right now, as a matter of fact.
Busy is an understatement, but yeah, we are doing our due diligence.
Absolutely, absolutely. Listen, I want you to tell us, our listeners, a little bit about the seat that you're running for and why you really want to run for that seat.
Okay. I'm Dante Walston. I'm running for Virginia's 79th District delegate seat. That seat covers a good section of Norfolk, parts of Portsmouth, and parts of Chesapeake. I'm running for this seat because this seat deserves someone that is truly going to do the work of the people. We need someone in Richmond that will represent the 79th District, that will fight for working class families, that will fight for the underdog. And that's what I'm choosing to do. We need someone that will fight for environmental justice. I don't know if you're familiar, but Norfolk, if it drizzles in certain areas of Norfolk, it will flood. We need someone that will be talking about flood mitigation. That is very close and dear to my heart. Being from Norfolk, I know how it is. I say to people when we're out canvassing, you shouldn't have to swim home. You should be able to walk right to your front door.
There you go.
We need someone in Richmond that are going to fight for those things. We also need someone in Richmond that will fight for criminal justice reform. The current incumbent does not talk about criminal justice reform, won't put it on a flyer, and won't fight about it in the General Assembly. So those are just a few of the reasons I said it's time to bring some progress to the 79th District, and I'm ready to do just that.
In taking a look at your platform and also your website, you are what we call not the typical candidate that runs for these positions, more older and established, but you're a fairly young man.
Right.
So what caused you to get bitten by the political bug at such a young age?
Well, listen, I say the younger the better. I'll say this and then I'll answer your question. I am a musician before I'm anything else. And one thing I was taught as a musician, every maestro has their final curtain call.
All right.
And it's for a bunch of people in Richmond to have their final curtain call. And but to go back to your point of me getting involved, I am a part of the International Longshoremen Association, and the ILA, as everybody calls it. And during the year, we do a lot of charitable things. We give away bikes. We give turkeys during Thanksgiving. We do Christmas baskets. We give to local charities. Being involved with them, being a part of the ILA for the last 7.5 years has really got me engaged with a lot of community community NAACP, the Her Shelter, a lot of groups that give back to the community. And being from Norfolk, living in the district, I saw there was no engagement with our current delegate and the district. I'll say this, there's no engagement with the little people in the district. And those are the people, to me, that matter the most. So between my involvement with the labor union and the community, I said, you know what, I've got the time, I'm young, I've got the energy, and I've got the drive. Let's see what happens. So I spoke with a bunch of friends that work in D.C., that work in Richmond, and I said, do you think that the 79th is ready for true progress, a progressive leader? And they said, yeah. So I said, let's get involved. So I started with a small team, and now I'm grateful to say that our team has built. We have canvases, we have our door knockers, and that's, as a matter of fact, that's what we're doing. And I took some time to rest my feet, but that's what we're doing now. But we really need someone that will get engaged. And from my interactions with the labor union and the community, I said, I think I'm the person for it.
Absolutely. Now, tell us about how your education, I know you attended Norfolk State University.
I'm on Norfolk State.
Absolutely. Tell us about how your education played into, your drive for these very important issues.
Oh, goodness. Norfolk born and raised, so I am a product of Norfolk Public Schools, and having my grandfather was very good friends with Dick Price. And he was always over at the house, and Mr. Price, he said, Dante, you don't need to look anywhere else but Norfolk State. And being a music education person, Norfolk State had one of the best, I think still does have one of the baddest bands.
Right.
And oh my goodness, it had a great choral program. So that's what pulled me into Norfolk State, and being at Norfolk State, being a part of the student council. And I believe when I was at Norfolk State was when I met Barack Obama. I mean, the bug jumped on me then. But again, at that point in time, which was 2008, there weren't a lot of young progressive leaders in Hampton Roads leadership, in Richmond, or in D.C. Wow. So at that point, I was like, well, maybe I'm too young for it. But when the bug really hit me was when I met Barack Obama for the second time, and he really encouraged young leadership. And that was while I was still a student at Norfolk State. I was actually finishing up my studies at Norfolk State, so that was about 2012. Uh-huh. Norfolk State, it's diversity, it's all of it. It's just a combination, and Norfolk State was truly a family, and they ushered me into leadership as a young person, and now I'm still a bit of a young person, a little bit older now, but it was a well-rounded education. I didn't just get my music studies; I got my community engagement. My first starts were at Norfolk State with some of the food drives that we did as a student. So it was a bit of everything. It was a bit of the Obama bug I still have, and the well-rounded education I got as a student that really said, you know what, the sky's the limit. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, it's funny you mention that, because it's a lot of individuals. We're having a conversation with the candidates, but the month of April, we're doing our very best to have the conversation with as many NSU graduates serving in the state legislature and General Assembly as possible, and that are running for office. And it's something about the culture here at NSU and the family environment that pushes not just our graduates to serve, but also to serve the people and for the needs of the people.
That's what it's about. That's truly what I I don't think that's too old-fashioned to say, but when leaders actually do it, it makes a difference. And, I'm quite certain, Dr. Claville, you know who Shirley Chisholm is.
Absolutely.
A good friend of mine gave me her book about a month ago, and I just finished it, Unbought and Unbossed.
That's right.
And Shirley, she was a pioneer, and she was truly about the work for the people. And I don't think that's old-fashioned, but that's truly where my heart is. The people that don't have the big bucks, the people that are trying to keep those lights on, that are trying to keep food in the cupboard. Those are the people I want to go to Richmond and fight for.
Absolutely. You mentioned Shirley Chisholm, and, you mentioned not just the title of her book, but that was her motto. That was her motto. And, when you talk about service, a lot of times individuals look at opportunity. But her and many others did not make a lot of money, out there on the civil rights movement trail and also in early government and in some now. But they go out to say, hey, we need to use government and public policy to make a difference in our community.
Well, Dr. Claville, that's what it ultimately should be about. Not the big industries, not the farmer, not the big bucks. It's supposed to be about giving straps to people's boots in the community so they can make it to the next step. And that's all it is. Again, this is not I'm not ashamed to say the delegate seat is not anything that I will become wealthy behind, but it is a vehicle.
It is a part-time position.
It's a part-time. You're right. It's a part-time legislator, but it is a vehicle I can use to push the people of Hampton Roads forward and the people across the state. Because unfortunately, throughout the legislature, Democrat and Republicans, there are members that are bought and bossed, and I refuse to be one of them.
You mentioned give straps, and we call it a hand up and not a hand out. And I always say that all of us needed help to get to where we are. First of all, somebody had to help you get boots. Somebody had to help you get the straps. Somebody had to help you and teach you how to tie the straps and to also keep them on and take them off and preserve them to move on. So when some people say, oh, I did it by myself, we all had help. And help comes in many, many different forms, and public service is definitely one of them. Another thing I want to talk with you about is how your education. You're a music educator, and the way that we're talking, I mean, you're teaching as you're talking.
Right.
How is your approach in education, and how do you see education in your platform being something that we can use in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and more specifically in District 79, in order to move our communities up as opposed to staying stagnant?
I agree. Listen to me. Education, again, being a form of education, I don't mind saying music is my heart, next to family and God and the people that are close to me. It really is near and dear to me. And teaching in the public school and working with the public schools and parks and recs, I met a diversity of people, all incomes, I met a diversity of people, and I really am a firm believer. Education is the gateway to the future.
Absolutely.
And seeing some of my students that came from the lower income neighborhoods that didn't have the better access in the public school system, but then seeing the other young people that were in the better neighborhoods in Norfolk, which had the better books, that had the better materials, that had the better computers, you could really see, and not to be dramatic, but you could really see you could see the divide. And
Absolutely.
I don't like to say division when it comes to children, but unfortunately, when you live on one end of the block, you get less than if you were to live on the other end.
Absolutely.
So, going back to my education ties, that makes me think once I get to Richmond, one of the first things I'm going to do is fight to increase the state funding across the board for public schools. Title I, lower income neighborhood, what have you, they should have the same access to schools that are in the better, brighter neighborhoods. I am a firm believer of that. I have visited schools. Now, this is pre-COVID now. The schools have been closed for a while. But before COVID, I saw what the lower income schools look like. I saw the lack of, to go in a few, printer paper, pencils. One of the administrators told me this was, I believe, February, the teachers were buying copying paper and pencils, and they were doing this out of their checks. And I'm sure, Doctor, that the teachers are terribly underpaid.
Come on.
Terribly underpaid. And thankfully, the state legislature has decided to give them a raise this year, but we need to fight to continue to give our teachers incentive raises. That way we can retain them, and that way they will work even harder. I believe when you pay people, they work even harder. Our teachers should not have to work from pillow to post, as they say. We should be able to invest in our teachers and invest in our young people, and I'm a firm believer of that. We've given enough breaks to big industry. Let's give our teachers and educators a break.
You're listening to Norfolk State University's WNSB Blazing Hot 91. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville, and you're tuned in to State of the Water. Here during the months of April, May, and June, we're having a conversation with the candidates for statewide and also local office. Remember, election for the primary is June 8th, and early voting starts April 23rd. Right now we're having a discussion with Mr. Dante Walston, graduate of Norfolk State University and candidate for District 79. Ms. Walston, you mentioned, education, and you also mentioned being invested in our infrastructure as far as flooding and the like. And I want to make a quick point with teachers. What our teachers have gone through with COVID in helping to educate our children. I mean, it's something that they didn't sign up for. It's something that none of us signed up for, but they went the extra mile, to ensure our children are educated via Zoom, the phone calls, the meetings, and so forth. So I just want to take a moment just to applaud all of our educators across the Commonwealth, here in Norfolk and across the country, for the work that they've done. I mean, seeing our kids still graduating, seeing our kids still progress, and the work that they've done. You're right. They need all the support that they can get, but especially COVID, just hats off to them.
Can I tag on to that?
Please.
This was something that is, truly unheard of, unprecedented, and then for it to continue to linger. And, again, the people that are most impacted to this, everyone's impacted in some kind of capacity, but the people that are most impacted are the lower income, those minority communities. So across the board, I applaud our teachers. But those that serve in those communities, my hat, and I bow out to them. Because these young people, a lot of them don't have the access to broadband and to computers and what have you. And the teachers continue, like you just said, the phone calls and this is just something that we need leadership that will work with our education system to give them the tools they need for our young people to take the future by hope.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But, with education, education is a part that we need to help give upward mobility. Again, a hand up, not a handout. But the other part of that is labor and workforce. And you talk about that, especially the uniqueness of the area that you want to represent and how we could utilize that in order to increase our economy and the economics of our community. Tell us a little bit about your plan for that and why that's important.
Well, I've got to say this, Doctor, and I'm so glad you mentioned this because my labor brothers and sisters, my union brothers and sisters would kill me if I don't mention being a part of the union. I am unashamedly a part of the union. Can I start there first and then I can branch back around?
Oh, listen, unions built our country, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I say this everywhere I go. The union gets such a bad connotation from time to time. All we want to do is steal money. But like you just said, I truly believe that the American labor is the heartbeat of our country.
Absolutely. I
really believe that. And I will say this. One of the programs I've been speaking to people as we walk through the neighborhoods and on podcasts and what have you, I've been talking about a program I want to implement across the district called Home Ownership from High School to Home Ownership. This is where we will bring the labor unions, we will bring the apprenticeship programs into the high schools for those young people that don't want to go to the universities and those young people that don't want to go into the military, so they can have an opportunity to become a part of the labor union, which has great paying jobs. These labor unions will protect these workers. They will ensure their future success. That's one of the programs I've spoken with members of Portsmouth and Norfolk, the city councils about implementing once I get to Richmond. But going back to the workforce, I am happy to be a part of the labor union, and I'm also happy to be a part of the middle working class family structure, which is, again, the heartbeat of the district. It was the heartbeat of Hampton Roads. And to be a candidate that comes from that, I see what those people need because I'm a part of them. And I don't mind getting my bootstraps dirty with them to fight to bring more jobs to the area. And that's one thing the union seeks to do. Between the firefighters and the police officers and the pipe fitters and the carpenters, they want to see better paying jobs come to the area. And being the only person that can say that I'm a part of the labor union, one of the only persons in this district running for the seat that is actually a part of working class people, I will take that on with the badge of honor to work with the industry to strengthen job enforcement in this area. We need more better paying jobs in this area. And I've got to also say this, I believe that I'm the only one running for this seat that has also talked about increasing the minimum wage.
Yes.
Minimum wage, I don't know anyone besides maybe a high school or a college student that can do anything with $7.25. We've got to give the people of Virginia, the people of Hampton Roads, a livable wage. And that goes back into the workforce and the labor, the union, they understand that. And a good deal of the industry understands it, but it's the people at top, those people that are benefiting from the little people not getting paid more, that don't want to see that happen.
You know, it's funny. Ms. Walston, it's funny you mentioned livable wage because I remember being a community organizer in undergrad back in the 90s. And that was one of the things that we were organizing on, that and environmental justice and social justice.
Right.
And we were talking about livable wages over 20 years ago. And,
wow.
and that was when I believe minimum wage was about $4.75, and went up that time. And
so
it has
not too far from where we are now.
Yeah, exactly. You know, you're talking, 20 years and the minimum wage is only going up $3 since that time period. But you're exactly right. You know, we're outpacing the cost of living is outpacing the wages in which we earn, and workers are seemingly not being valued over profit. So
that's right.
Just as a whole, not just from your campaign platform, but as a whole, you know, the country, the Commonwealth, and our local areas definitely need that livable wage discussion and not a minimum wage.
I mean, if you look, I'm walking through, I'm over in the Granby High School, Granby Elementary neighborhood today. Mm-hmm. With some canvases walking through, and I was talking about, I looked at that house. I was in the marketplace for homes about 5 years ago, and I said, I remember that house was whatever it was 5 years ago. Now the house is going to buy another $100,000. How can our young people, how can our people of Hampton Roads or across the state expect to buy a home making $725? I mean, that's just not real. That's not realistic.
It is not. It is not. And again, these are issues that individuals have to fight for the common man. And a lot of times, and you know, we forget about, like you said, the everyday citizens that are working every day, going to work every day, raising their families, coming home, cooking dinner, helping kids with their work, going to church on Sundays, and just really, and going to the parks on Saturdays, and just really want to live their lives in a safe community with education opportunities for their kids that they don't have to take out loans for in order to have.
Absolutely. Opportunity and access. Those are my two hashtags for this campaign. We've got to give the people opportunity, and we've got to give them access. That I am firm. The big industries, they have had the break since the beginning of time of our country. So now it's time to give the little people. It's time to give them a break.
Absolutely. You know, going back to your discussion on unions, and you know, we talked about how unions help to build a country. And right now we have big corporations that are basically coming against unions. And I know that and the Commonwealth of Virginia is also a favorite of corporations not having unions as well.
Tell me about.
You know, how important is that labor push, the unionization of labor for the future of our labor force?
Well, you know what? I've got to say this. One of the first things I will fight for once elected is to repeal the right to work. People should be able to unionize. People should be able to come together as a collective body to fight for issues pertaining to their job. And again, Big industry loves Virginia, but we also have, oh my goodness, I've got to say, this might make me sound terrible, but I've got to say this. We've got members of the Democratic Party that are not fighting with the common worker. They just are not. And you know what, Dr. Claville, you can't keep sweeping issues under the door and under the rug and expecting them to disappear. We've got members of our own Democratic Party that we've got to hold to the bat. And unfortunately, they have not. And as a young progressive, as a prayerfully soon elected member of the Democratic Party, I will caucus our members. We've got to come together as a body for working class people. We must. It's a given. The working class, they really drive our state forward. So now again, it's time to give them back what's due. And unfortunately, we have people of our own party of the Democratic Party that are not fighting for them, and that it's quite unfortunate. But I will be one of the ones fighting to repeal the right to work. I'm certain you have heard of Jeff Bezos, the richest man in America, has really plotted against the Amazon workers for not being able to assemble a union, and that's unfortunate. It's quite unfortunate. But as a member or as a soon-to-be member of the body, I will be petitioning. We've got to give our workforce, we've got to give them a hand up, and that's going to be one of the first steps we can give them, being able to have the right to work.
And the last part of that you spoke about, I know time is moving, and I just want to look at this last point that you mentioned about being able to bring skilled jobs in education to our K through 12 schools. We're valuing skills. I know 4-year education is great, but we also need skills as well. And being able for a high school student to know, hey, in 16, 17, 11, and 12th grade, I want to try my hands at this skill. Or even those that are going to go to a 4-year institution, still, it's good to learn a skill. It's great to learn a skill.
Absolutely. I've got to say this on top of that. It's unfortunate that the vocational schools, they have the funding has been, drained completely out of the sponge. So once elected, I will, again, continue to work. The biggest thing I will do once elected is continuing to keep the connection or reestablishing the connection between Richmond and the local leadership. That way I can work one-on-one with getting those programs back into the high school. Again, we need carpenters. We need plumbers. We need welders. Those are well-paying jobs.
Absolutely.
And we don't have too many people in Richmond talking about that. And that's near and dear to my heart. That, again, will give high schoolers the access to capital, which will give them access to buy their own homes. And that's what it's about. Again, giving our people the tools that they need to push ahead. That's all I'm trying to do.
Absolutely. You've been listening to candidate for District 79 here for the House of Delegates in the Commonwealth of Virginia, Mr. Dante Walston. If you want to learn more about him and his campaign, simply go to www.walstonva79.com. That's walstonva79.com, and learn more about if you want to contribute, if you want to volunteer or help. He's out there canvassing right now. He took a 30-minute break to have a conversation with us. And as an NSU alum, you've got to sound off before you leave. Behold,
the green and gold.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. You take care. Thanks again.
Absolutely. Well, again, we believe that all politics is local. I know a lot of times we hear a lot about voting during the time period of the presidential election, the vice presidential election, and the like. But really, politics and public policy affecting you on the ground level happens in these elections. So we understand how important the Commonwealth's attorney is, not just here in Norfolk, but across our Commonwealth, and our delegates that are representing us, our school board members, our city council members, and also those serving on the commission. And I'd just like to give a hats off to all of our public servants. If you're an elected official and you're serving, a lot of times the public don't understand the pressure that you're under or the decisions that you have to make. So we honor that, and we honor you for being a public servant. But ensure that you stick with us here on State of the Water for the month of April, May, and June. as we have a conversation with the candidates. Remember, this is for the June primary. On June 8th, you can go to the poll and vote for the person that you want to represent you here in your delegate district, also in your local elections, attorney general, statewide elections of governor and lieutenant governor. Early voting starts April 23rd. Again, that's April 23rd for early voting. But remember, your voice, your vote, make sure that you make your opinion heard and support the candidate of your choice. Here at Save the Water, we simply bring you the candidate, but we don't influence you to vote for anyone. Make the decision yourself. We'll see you next Sunday. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville, and behold the green and gold.